Perfect. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is just a quick update from the notebook working group, which I'm one of the leads of. Just because I think it's something we've made that I think is useful for other people to see, is that we've made a Kanban as a project on GitHub, and I mean the notebook working group has just stuff everywhere, so it's kind of a bit of a mess at the moment. So what we've tried to do to organize it is we've kind of made some different streams. I know this is not really how Kanban works, but bear with me. So there's still the general concept of backlogs, to-dos, and then in progress and done. And these are still automated so that when you close issues, they do get moved to in progress and done. But what we've done is just we've kind of split things up into a planning stream and some streams that are related to the apps that we control. And we've tried to tag every issue that we can see that's still open into these categories. And it is a bit of work, but the benefit for it is that it lets everyone in the community see what we're working on right now. So you can see everything that's in progress is the things that people in the various parts of the group are working on. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, I think it's just a good practice. Obviously, if you've got another method that your working group wants to use, feel free to. It's just, I do want to encourage people to have a publicly viewable place where people can see what other teams are working on, just so that we know that you're not dead or you're not, gone and not really interested in the project. So I don't know. If anyone else wants to do that, feel free. If anyone wants any help setting up exactly one like this, I'm happy to help you with that. But that's just cool. Does anyone want to comment on that before we move on?
So for pipelines, we are doing similar things, but I guess one thing different is that we are using it really like a Kanban. We have columns for issues waiting contributors or issues that are like rejected or issues that we have decided to work on ourselves. So they have a priority label in a column, and I think that really gives a really great view of what's the state of all the issues in the repo.
Cool. So that's awesome. So is that linked on your so if we went to the community repo and we went to, because what I think we should put all of these links is, now we've got the community repo stuff. Actually, no, the best way to get there now, if everyone was wondering, we've updated the README on Kubeflow. So you can go now here and you can see all the working groups. So that's useful for everyone. And you can click on them and you get to the right community page for them. So let's look at pipelines one. So we can probably refactor some of this as well, but it's we should probably aim to put all of these sort of tracking things in here, just so that any new person who wants to see what any team is working on can go there, or if you forget where the link is. I will try and make our one there as well. I don't think our one's currently there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should put the link here to the working group.
These are dynamically generated. That's the only negative. Like, I think these are generated from the YAML. Can someone clarify if that's true?
Yeah, it should be generated from the YAML.
Yeah, so I mean, the formatting here may not be the best for what we're talking about, because we probably need a second section, like, planning or something. I don't know. Sorry, a fourth section. Anyway, so that's just a thought there. Yeah. I might make so we did actually make an issue on the community repo before that says, where are you tracking stuff? But I'm not sure if everyone had set up something at that point. So maybe I'll raise another one and ping people and say, just chuck in your links here and we'll try and get them updated. That will be cool. Okay, so from my perspective, if someone can disagree if they want, I think the most important working group sort of that has to report back on what they're planning for the beginning of the year is the manifests one, just because it is a blocker on at least a lot of what Notebooks is doing, and I imagine it would be on some other people as well, because there is a lot of discussion around some significant changes to Manifest. So if someone from Manifest is here, is there someone from Manifest here?
Hi, Matthew. Yes, this is Yanis.
So could you just give us, I mean, forgive me if you've done it in meetings in the last year and things, just kind of for 2021, can you give us a bit of an update on what you're planning to do? Because I think there is a discussion around making sure that we block 1.3 against your changes as well, just so we don't release 1.3 until those are in place.
Yeah, essentially the 1.3 release depends on manifest, as you said. It will be a release of the manifest. We had our first meeting for 2021 yesterday. I will I will upload the recording today, but it's not full. I press recording too late. That's on me. It won't happen next time. So the deal there is that we have a plan for the new year and how to move. Our first step would be to move all manifest development from the manifest repo back to upstream applications. So the first thing would be to document all this work and start pinging application owners to get their manifest back, essentially, inside the repos again. Our second step would be to devise some automation to sync them back and keep them in sync and track their origin in the manifest repo centrally. And finally, we can look into validating them and doing tests and into tests, etc. So two steps are what I just
Yeah, that
enumerated.
sounds good. So, is that what has that been kind of made public, that sort of information, or is that something that's just happened, that decision?
Yeah, so right now it just exists in the meeting notes of the manifest working group, but this will find its way into issues inside, umbrella issues in the working group repos, in the repos actually of each component that needs to do things. And the general plan is to, open issues and get the help of other working groups to do their part. Well, of course, we provide them with a very clear guide on what would you like to see.
So what about repos? What about manifests that correspond to things that go across applications?
So you're talking about things like Istio and stuff like that?
That's a separate question. Let's talk about Istio specifically in a second. But I mean, just kind of more general config things that don't necessarily have one single repo.
Do you have something in mind?
I'm just trying to remember. There are definitely like KFAM and some other things like that.
But KFAM does have a repo. It's under Kubeflow.
It is under Kubeflow, but I'm just saying like that's fine. But I'm just saying like, is that there? And if there isn't now, there still may be in the future ones that would be cleaner than duplicating in every single one or things like that.
I would say let's think about it when we hit that case.
Now before we go on to the Istio thing, because I think that's going to be a big discussion with lots of people. What is the way that you're making your progress available? Is it just through your notes, or is it through? Do you have like a central issue, sort of meta issue for this change, or?
Yeah, we will have a meta. We don't have it yet. We will have a meta issue for this.
Cool, because that'd be awesome.
Just the comment, I created a GitHub issue for just we talk about the Kubeflow manifest working group, and we mentioned by Yanis, and I put the link, the GitHub issue link in the chat. Yeah, if anyone, I can also mention it in the agenda.
Also, could you tag all of the leads? You know, the groups, using like work, like for all the applications.
Yeah,
I mean.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. Yeah, no problem.
Because that's just, I just want to have a place where we can observe it, because especially if we're going to not release 1.3 until that's done, obviously it's like priority number one type thing. So because it will block everything. Okay, so the question
and currently underway.
Awesome.
What's the next question?
So the next question is those central cluster applications. So I wrote a little small, not really proposal in a traditional sense, but just a kind of a plea to the community to consider splitting off every application which is not really, which is clearly not Kubeflow, out of the Kubeflow manifest repo, and instead encouraging distributions, if they want to use it, to set up their own YAMLs for their own distribution, or in the more general case, just having it be the thing that we assume is already on the cluster for the user, so this has got a few likes on it, but I think it's mostly from users, not necessarily from everyone here. But just sort of, I think for a lot of people, installing Kubeflow is very difficult right now because of this issue. Of course, distributions are a separate question. You know, people who are setting up a Kubernetes cluster on GCP to run this from scratch. But so what is the plan with regards to like Istio, Spark, Operator, a bunch of other applications? There's quite a few central ones. I think I list them down.
There are a few select third-party applications that we're going to provide the manifest to in our manifest repo. We plan to have those, you know, in a separate folder. It will be clear that we're not providing them, but it's, you know, I will feel that they're necessary, at least at the start, to get platform owners and administrators started with, you know, using something that's complete. You can find a list of those components in the charter of the manifest working group. I think it's Dex, it's Istio, it's
Cert Manager, Knative.
Yeah.
So Knative is very tied to serving right now. If someone from serving is here, is that even possible for you to like make it an optional install based off your current YAML?
Is that a question for me or?
Oh yeah, so is someone from KF serving here? Like, because I feel like if I'm trying to remember the YAML specifically, but in my head I think it's very intertwined with the actual YAML for KF serving, and as a result, I think it isn't necessarily, without a lot of editing, possible to not install Knative through Kubeflow. Is someone from KF serving here or not? If not, that's fine. Oh.
Hey Matthew, this is Animesh. I'm driving at this point, right?
Oh my gosh.
There is no reason you can't separate, right? I mean, it's just the fact that it's available as part of the KF serving is because that's the only component which uses Knative. But I don't see any reason why, you know, it's intertwined. You can definitely. I mean, we are installing KF serving on environments where there is an existing Knative, right? So yeah.
Cool. So it's more like, I'm not saying that it can't be done. Obviously it can. I'm just saying like, it's something that I think we should think about doing, is just making sure that even if it lives in your repo, that it's in a separate folder so that someone can choose not to install it. Like customized folder.
Makes sense.
Cool. So for these issues here, does anyone want to talk about what their perspectives are on whether this is a good idea for people who aren't in the manifest group, whether they think it's a good idea for the manifests to live in the repos of the applications, or does anyone have any objections to that idea? I'll give you like 5 seconds. Because I mean, I'm kind of not really sure either way, but I think it will work either way. It's just, I'm just slightly concerned that it may cause situations where it's unclear what version is going into the, if it's a syncing thing we talked about. So what plans do you have for that syncing the people in the manifest group?
It's the next step.
Okay, so not yet. We don't have a plan yet, or?
We do have a plan of what needs to happen. We know that we need to sync things and somewhat track them. We don't have what we don't have right now is like don't have the implementation right now, and I don't have the technical details right now. But we know what we want to do, and we will tackle it right after the first step.
Because what I'm specifically referring to, maybe I walked around it, was so for application repos which have multiple applications, obviously Kubeflow is the most significant of that, where we have like 10. How will the version that gets synced in be decided to the manifest repo, assuming people are still installing from the manifest repo? Will it be a tag-based thing? Because a tag-based thing may not work properly if it's if we're not really careful about how we design the syncing.
We're versioned by Git, so yeah, I imagine it will be a tag-based thing.
So or I guess maybe it's a release on the GitHub repo, maybe. that contains that
The
subdirectory?
tag as well, right? A release in GitHub is a tag plus download links plus a message.
That's what I'm saying. So like, I just think we need to, that's something I think we should put thought into, right? Which is for repos which aren't like the typical ones, because most of them do have a single thing per repo. For the ones which have multiple, where the versioning may be out of sync between the various components, trying to make sure that we have a cohesive platform may be difficult unless things are directly referring to those repos themselves. Maybe that's the alternative rather than doing pull request syncing. Just having the manifest repo be for those common apps, and then have the customized KFCTL thing go and download from the actual root repo.
I'm not sure I understood the problem there. Sorry.
I'm just saying maybe doing pull requests. I'm assuming you're talking about automated pull requests into manifests. Is that what the plan is?
Well, I didn't refer to the specific mechanism. I didn't actually have that in mind. But more general, so yeah, it could involve auto PRs, but I was talking about more generally the mechanism, the automation, the tool that will sync and track the upstream sources.
Yeah, because I mean I think from my perspective, if I'm going to vote on it in my mind, would be that we don't store any of the application YAML in Kubeflow manifests at all, and we only store it in the upstream ones, and we use the upstream tags as authoritative sources, and the thing we store in manifests is links to the tagged version of the repo upstream.
Okay, so I think I got it. I think I can answer it. So what you're saying essentially is store references or vendor.
Exactly. And you can choose either, right? So if some vendor makes a specific version of an
I
app.
think I can take this for manifest with vendor. It's a, if we start discussing vendor versus links, it's a, there are arguments on both sides. For manifest especially, it seems just better to vendor. It works better with customize. It's what customize prescribes.
So wait, can you describe? Maybe I'm misinterpreting. What do you mean by vendor?
Vendor, I mean actually copy things from one repo to another.
And this is Igor. Let me chime in. So I think the plan to sync by tag into the central manifest repository is a good idea. That will make life easier for everyone, including people who upstream from who install from upstream or people who install into distributions. So as long as we basically pool all the things together where they can be easier found in a central manifest repository and tag it properly to be in sync with the releases, that would be good enough. Then people can pull from there into their respective GitHub repositories as needed,
So are you suggesting that we do store the YAML manifests from, let's say, pipelines in Kubeflow manifests, or just a reference to it?
No, the whole thing. It's a little file. I don't know how to store a reference. I would say it's a copy.
Because I guess, what about when there's like different, because I think what we're trying to do, what we were at least trying to do last year, was we're trying to encourage release cadences that are independent of Kubeflow for each of the component apps.
And that's fine. That's fine, but there is also a release of Kubeflow that kind of like captures a moment in time for all of these manifests and tests them and makes them a Kubeflow release and freezes them in that moment of time as the working version of Kubeflow.
Wouldn't it make more sense to, instead of freezing just the masters, to instead freeze specifically tagged versions of each of the components of Kubeflow? Like say, this release 1.3 includes version 1, whatever versioning system you have for each of the apps, like 0.6 of pipelines. And,
Possible, yeah. It's very likely, right? It's very likely because, to freeze a Kubeflow release, you may sometimes have to pull a version that is older than master or main, the last version that is known to work. So there should be capability for that, where older version of application manifest will go into the Kubeflow manifest repo.
Sorry, someone else was trying to talk just then.
I think both would work if the tooling catches up. But right now there are some technical issues with the tooling that I think it's better to copy right now. One is that, for example, for Kubeflow pipelines, the main manifest has been like optimizing for direct install using kubectl, and it has a really old customized version so that like it wouldn't be directly compatible with Kubeflow manifest, and we have to do auto conversion when pulling sources from Kubeflow pipelines manifest, and that's one reason. And another is that I think generally customized doesn't work really well with remote references. Like for example, if we have one customized file that refer to multiple remote sources, even though those remote sources can be in the same repo, like when you apply that customized manifest, it couldn't cache the repo. It will fetch the entire repo multiple times for each of those reference. So that approach doesn't really scale very well. I think at this moment, it's the best way is to copy them to Kubeflow manifest repo, but we should keep in mind that these are they are just one-way copies, and the source of truth still lives in each application's manifest.
Yep, 100%.
But so I'm still very concerned that that is gonna, like, if we're gonna make any change now, we should make it now, and while we're making these significant moves. And my perspective is that we've got KFCTL already. That can be it's already pretty much does what I'm saying. We can modify it to make it more efficient if we need to. But like, effectively, the concept should be that the manifest repo I don't know what its purpose is beyond being the upstream of all the vendors of the distributions. But at very least in my mind, it should be capable of, like, we will be able to release Kubeflow more frequently if we, instead of trying to version the whole of the Kubeflow manifest repo, we have releases in the Kubeflow manifest repo which reference the upstream YAMLs of specific versions.
That's what we'll do. That's what you're describing. It's what we will do.
But yet you're still saying to copy everything. Or are we saying they're going to be one copy in manifest for each version of the upstream?
Exactly. So you will have like version 1 point, I don't know. So for example, version A for pipelines, version B for KF serving, etc.
So what you're saying is that we store duplication of the the entirety of the YAML for a particular released version of that source application.
Exactly.
But we keep
and
all of them in the same branch.
Vendor.
So
when
just
I said vendor earlier, yeah, vendor is an overloaded term. What I actually meant was this scoping of things.
So I'm sorry for dragging this out, but I think it's really important. I just want to clarify. So what it would look like, just not specifically, but maybe, would be that there'd be a folder called, let's say, pipelines, and under that folder there would be a folder for each of the versions of pipelines. And
no, there will be one folder called like upstream and contain like the latest version, something like that. The latest tagged version.
Okay, but then that still doesn't solve the problem of vendors wanting to use different versions of different apps. Or distributions wanting to use different versions of different apps.
Okay, they can do that, no problem. Manifest is just, something that is out there to make their lives easier. If they don't want to use something from there, it's okay. They can do it.
I don't know. I still think it's a very important thing. Anyway, if possible, could you formalize the plan so that people can write comments like what I'm saying onto it? Like, so maybe on that meta issue, and then we can have a discussion in the community around the implications of the decision, because I think this is a very important decision, and we don't want to have to make 2 significant changes in quick succession. So
I would encourage, yes, of course, we will have, this is the next step. I would encourage engaging with the manifest working group. The meetings are, the next one, I think it's in 2 weeks on Tuesday.
Time zones can be a little bit of an issue, but yeah.
Yes, we actually don't, we only have actually one meeting right now. It's, but Matthew, if you want, if it's, the hours are not good, we also plan to have another one. If you could comment on the Slack with a set of good hours, we could look into adding another one for other time zones as well.
Yeah, of course. I think very similar to this meeting, obviously we have 2 time zones, one in the morning and one in the evening, California time. So potentially that would be a similar approach.
I hope not, because this one is killing me.
That's the problem, right? Time zones suck. But yeah, that's a logistical problem. But yeah, so at very least, let's try and get in writing what the plan is somewhere, whether it's on the community like discussion or whether it's in an issue. I just want a place where we can actually discuss this, because it's such a it's like this will be the life or the death of Kubeflow, and how, because it will impact how easy it is to install and how easy it is to make vendor distributions of, and how fast we can get releases out.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least my perspective on it. But anyway, so has anyone got anything more they want to add to that before we move on? Okay, so the next thing I wanted to just talk about is similar to this, but I wanted to figure out who's working on this or if we've got any actions on it, which is I still see so many issues both in the repos and in the discussion and on the Slack around installing Kubeflow, like in the sense of getting a new Kubeflow install set up. Is anyone currently working on that documentation? Obviously it's a vendor code. Yeah. Josh?
That's kind of an open statement. Installing it where?
Though this is what I'm saying. So there's the first question when you try and install is, you've got a blank slate in your mind. Which one do I go to? We have that getting started page. It is a little bit cluttered, to say the least. And it makes no statements around what is best for each type of person or user. Those sort of things are part of the issue. But then even when we have when a user has made a decision of which one may be best for them, it's a very much of a muchness as to whether the experience is well documented or not at all.
I think that Rui is leading the effort to redo the documentation, the structure of it, with some of redo of getting started. And the intent there is also to better document user journeys that are driven by the distributions, And this user journey is going to be different depending on which distribution they pick, depending on which platform, cloud platform or on-prem they pick, And sometimes the install is going to be super simple on one node, but limited. And sometimes install is not going to be simple. And let's admit it, Kubeflow is can be a complex platform, and it's okay because it solves complex problems. It's like, make I don't know, CBOS is one-click install ready for production.
I'm not saying that that's the problem. I'm just saying that it doesn't matter how complex the solution is. It's more that it's just, I feel like it's something where not a lot of the people contributing to Kubeflow are actively trying to install it very often, and from scratch, I mean. And as a result, it probably does cause some issues, or when they do it, they fix it in their own mind, but they don't write in the documentation what they did differently to the last version.
I think it's probably the issue is, I mean, people are installing it, like at least, the organizations who are using it. It's just that, the entry point is probably not what you are assuming it is, right? I mean, if I have to install, or anyone within IBM is installing Kubeflow, right? We specifically just go to that page, right? Kubeflow on IBM Cloud or Kubeflow on OpenShift. these are the two pages, right? So I think probably you are approaching it from a beginner perspective, which is, hey, I don't know where to install, and then I'm entering it, and then I'm going through it and making a decision. But and actively we are maintaining those pages, right? We are getting feedback, hey, this is not documented, this is breaking, and those PRs keep on going, right? So you're probably not looking at individual installs on individual cloud providers, right, which are being assumed. At least, I mean, I see that coming up every 3 days. Hey, this step needs to be fixed, so we go and fix it, right? But again, our entry point is very specific.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not saying every single vendor has this problem. I'm just saying more generally, right? Like, if we want Kubeflow to be adopted, it should be easier to adopt, right? And I think the most problematic piece right now is still just getting it installed. And whether that looks, and I think that getting started page is obviously the first place to look. And I think that's so if we could, like, make sure we track that issue. So does someone have an issue they could paste in here for that? For the getting started page refactor someone mentioned? If we can move on while someone's finding that, but hopefully if there's no issue, could we create one? And if there is an issue, perfect, we can link it here.
And the other part is, Matthew, right? I mean, I'm seeing more and more like, I need to install this part of Kubeflow, I need to install that part of Kubeflow. I think the notion of everybody's installing everything of Kubeflow together, at least, I'm not seeing use cases around that until, there is a totally novice organization which has nothing throughout the ML lifecycle, right? So that's probably to keep in mind, right? I mean, I need pipelines, or I need KF serving, and I'm just looking at the training, right? So it's less set of users and more, they are probably, more experimental users, right? Who will be needing whole of Kubeflow all at once, right?
Be precise. That's not, that's exactly what I'm saying though, right? So that's coming back down to the manifests problem we were talking about earlier. But I'm not talking about that when I mean Kubeflow. I mean installing the pieces of Kubeflow that you need, right? When I say Kubeflow, I just mean anything of Kubeflow. I'm not specifically saying the entirety of Kubeflow. And that is not that well documented in some of the distributions, right? Some of the distributions imply that you have to install everything as well in their documentation.
Yeah, there is an issue, but I don't remember that issue, overwhelming issue. But yeah, I mean, there is also a particular challenge installing parts of Kubeflow into the cluster that I already have with particular configurations. So I personally struggled with install of KF serving into the cluster that is already set up with Istio and Cert Manager and DAX. And I couldn't figure it out because there are parts of KF serving that are not well documented, where required config maps need to be set up. So for a beginner of KF serving, it was almost an impossible task to actually install into an existing but complex cluster.
Yep. Animesh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, I mean, KF serving as such, yes, it's the most complex piece of all the different pieces of Kubeflow, right, to install and set up, particularly because, the Istio and Knative stack dependency, right? And yeah, I don't know what to say to it. It's something, right? It's just because, you're dealing with so many different pieces of the software all at once, right? There is not a perfect world there. There is the 5-minute get it on your laptop version, right? Which, a lot of people report, being very successful if they're just looking for development needs, right? But obviously I can think of so many different scenarios, right? Even in OpenShift right now, okay, we say bring your own Istio and install KF serving. And now the Red Hat folks are struggling with, in terms of adding, okay, there is an OpenShift service mesh, which is built on top of Istio. How do we provide instructions with that, right? So the permutations and combinations can be so much when you're looking at Istio, Knative, KF serving, and Kubernetes versions that, and then, you bring in Cert Manager. So definitely it gets, complex, yeah.
Which is exactly why I think we're coming back to that, why I keep hitting on that manifest issue, because all of those problems that you're describing stem from the manifests. Because like, there are some pieces which don't, I guess, like you're saying, specific complexities around proprietary Istio. But I'm talking more around, like, if we have designed with the intention that cluster level applications are not part of Kubeflow, are offered but are not part of Kubeflow. And the manifests for them are very separate intentionally. I think it'll be a lot easier for both vendors to create distributions and for users to create their own distributions that work.
Yeah, I'm not saying that problem doesn't need to be solved, but as I said, I mean, I don't think, the KF serving problems are related to manifest. It's more like, again, I mean, one of the most recent example, right? Hey, the ingress IP when it is on a public IP address versus when it is private, right? Or, I'm using, HTTPS versus HTTP. A lot of those are around those scenarios versus less of a manifest issue, right? It's the particular, because how Knative probes travel internally, etc., right? They get impacted so much depending on the network configuration, right? So it's more around those versus the manifest issues. But I mean, definitely the manifest problem on its own is a valid problem, right? As you mentioned.
Yeah. Okay. So I just wanted to bring this to people's attention. The solution for it, it's not clear. And I think this is what I just want to ask everyone is how will we know that we've achieved enough when it comes to making Kubeflow easy to install? And that doesn't mean the whole of Kubeflow. That just means, someone who wants to use Kubeflow, that means any piece of it, that it is easy enough for them to do it, that we don't need to work on it much more. It's like, how will we know? Is there any way we can evaluate that?
Focus on user journeys. Basically, who is the user and what and then have several parts in it on a laptop. It's completely different thing to install it on your own cluster that you run on-prem, an entirely different thing to install it on GCP. Just examples,
It's actually not that different between on-prem and GCP, to be frank. They both are existing clusters.
Yeah. And an existing cluster, but like on super simple, super small cluster without DNS, without SSL, without cert manager. That's one thing. And another is a real life production ready cluster. You cannot describe it in a single set of documentation. It needs to be completely two different paths for the users.
Yeah, and anyway, so anyway, I think user stories are good, but we still need to think of some ways of actually evaluating the current state of it, because it's in a pretty bad state right now. Obviously, one of those metrics could be how many people are raising issues, but right now, for a lot of the distributions, it's very, very difficult to do any sort of customization except just doing it exactly like the default state of the vendor. Anyway, 1.3, I think we need to move on to that just because that's obviously important for this year. So I'm not sure who gets to make this decision, but so it seems like we're implying we're going to be not releasing 1.3 until whatever we're doing with manifests has happened. Whose the releases are for 1.3?
Yeah, so I am, wait, is my microphone on?
Yeah, okay.
Yes, so I am, I guess, the release manager for 1.3. As part of the manifest work, I think it's appropriate to assume the responsibility to do the grunt work required to get the release out. And what I'm hoping actually is that the effort that that we will put in the manifests will be reflected in the reduced amount of work that will be necessary for the release.
Exactly. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So is your opinion that we should, so how long are we expecting this manifest refactor to take?
I expect it to be within the time frame of the next release, which following a 3-month cadence, I believe. The release should be end of February, start of March, I think.
So we're going to target a particular date. So that comes to the next question is, what is our cutoff target going to be, right? So, and we don't have to set one right now. We could even delay further if we're really seriously going to block against this, because I don't know how long this is going to take, but we should at least put an initial target in, right? So what day are people comfortable with for their own feature releases, obviously, but more than that, to get this manifest refactor done, right? So we can try and put a date in now that says March 1st or whatever, but
Matthew, I think that this is great direction, but I think that to put a date in right now, I think we should put this out that we're looking for a date, and we try to get a date either next week or the week after.
Oh yeah, of course.
But yeah, I think this putting this on the agenda, I think, is a great thing for us to be able to follow up on and just plant the seed.
That's all I'm trying to do here, just kind of making sure that people actually, we get a release that doesn't happen. Like we've had a few releases where there hasn't been, we've had very much quick decisions around timing and things like that maybe should have been delayed a little bit and other things. But anyway, the last one I would propose that we also block against is the docs refactoring. So this is a pull request by someone to propose a new structure, not to actually do the refactor. Is this person here? Is Rui here?
He's asleep, I'm sure.
Okay, cool. Slacker. I mean, I'm kidding. Okay, so no, obviously time zone. So this is, I think I'd propose that we also, if the release czar agrees, that we do not release 1.3 until the docs have been refactored.
So I'm concerned about that one.
Okay.
This is Joe. So the refactor that Rui is suggesting is different from some of the work that we've talked about previously about splitting the component docs onto their own sites. And so I guess I would, if possible, I would prefer to roll the major refactor of kubeflow.org with moving the component docs to their permanent home rather than do two separate projects.
I completely agree. I actually had forgotten that was not in this refactor. So that is a really important point to raise. So what are we gonna, so is there any work that's been done as to, so there's movement of the pieces around here, which at least will have potentially helped us group together which pieces live in which of those new separate app websites.
If I may jump on this, so yes, because I took some time to go over and over this PR. I think the work that Rui is doing is at least the first step of essentially reorganizing so that the components have their own section. And then I don't remember if it was Joe's comment. After we have a structure that everybody agrees and components are a specific section, they can be moved out to and have a single line in each bullet that says, okay, it's a small description, and then go there to the components documentation. But I don't think it's 100% conflicting.
So I think Joe was more raising that whether or not we do this as a 1-2 step, we should view them as the same step in the requirement for 1.3. Is that what you're saying?
Well, and I'm not sure that we should link that to 1.3 because this is going to be a tricky one. So it's certainly one that we can continue to talk about, and it would be great to have Rui be a part of this conversation. So perhaps this is something that perhaps we can take on in the next meeting.
Yep, I agree. I'm obviously not going to be there for that. If you're going to be there for that, that's awesome. I guess that we'll add it to the agenda, and you should raise it and discuss what you're talking about. But my question is really, so I think we should have some documentation refactor for 1.3 just so that it's easier for people to find what they need. And then if what we're saying is that the next step after that is to replace, rather than this section being on the main Kubeflow org, it's just a link to the org the website which has central dashboard. I don't think it's conflicting in the same, because this can be done before 1.3, right? There's no reason this can't be done.
Well, so what Rui is currently recommending, so for example, moving components out of docs. So currently now the components section has the docs for that component. So I would essentially, the information architecture, to my mind, doesn't make as much sense if you're leaving the docs in the components section.
Sorry, can you? I didn't quite understand what you meant.
Okay, so right now, components is a subsection of docs.
Okay.
So that's just indicating that you're getting the documentation for the components rather than not necessarily technical information about the components. So I would recommend keeping that convention until the components are not actually providing, or we're not providing actual documentation about the components, that we're providing basic information about the component with a link to go out and get the documentation.
Well, is this just a matter of calling what you call here components docs? Because it's not that different. There's a lot of splitting right now that I think this was fixing, like moving things under the same place.
Well, and reorganizing the components section itself, I have no objection to that.
Because that's mostly what's happening here, right? If you just named this docs in your mind, it's pretty much what's happened here, right?
No. So if you go to the last comment that Rui made, that makes it pretty clear because it just shrinks it all down, and it's not going to be on that window. You'll need to go to that tab. Yeah, there we go. Conversation, last one. Okay. So essentially, it's making components the peer of docs. So what I would recommend is keeping components under docs until such time as they're not docs anymore.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that they are docs. Is the word docs the reason that you want it to be under docs, or is it because of some other reason?
So
because they are components, right? But they're also docs about those
they would
components.
remain in the components section. I don't see the point of moving the components section when it's. I'll continue the conversation on.
Yeah.
On the thread, I will.
Yeah, I think that's because I think if you've got a good proposal, do it, and I'm sure we will all agree. It's just obviously this has mostly been really for the point to this point, so we're all good for discussion and things. But I think we should try and get some refactor in before 1.3. I genuinely do, just because it'll make Kubeflow more approachable. I agree though that we should try and focus on a structure which will be similar to what it will be once we do those changes that we've talked about with the application websites, so that it doesn't change dramatically twice. Does anyone else want to comment on this? Lots of people unmuted. Nope. Okay. Cool. I mean, this is an important issue. Let's continue it on that thread. So if anyone wants to comment, it's on the link. The link is in the docs or in the meeting notes. Other than that, Josh raised a small issue just at the end here. CV, do you want to quickly talk about that?
I did that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Jeff did. Sorry. Can you explain what you mean?
So, well, with notebooks, the notebooks working group, are you guys going to scan your images for CVs, and are you going to remediate them?
So this is an important discussion that we're still kind of getting back together after the new year. First meeting is probably tomorrow. But you're correct that we're trying to decide what we're going to do with the images, whether they will live in their own repo or whether they will continue to live in Kubeflow, which they probably will, and whether we should implement some sort of scanning. I totally agree that we should. But of course, the negative is that right now, Kubeflow's images, for notebooks at least, are tagged to the releases of Kubeflow itself, which isn't necessarily sensible, right? Because there's no reason you can't use, there's nothing about specific versions of the notebooks which require you to have a specific version of Kubeflow. So decoupling those releases is its own problem from having so much stuff in one repo.
Right. And then
So
the other working groups, I mean, I don't know. I know the central dashboard has
that's part of notebooks, yeah.
Oh, that is part of notebooks?
Pretty much every UI piece is part of notebooks.
Okay. That's good. So yeah. So we just want to we need to put a permanent agenda item for working groups to ensure that their images have no CVs, which is not can be a tall order, but
because there's this other factor here, which is that at least for the images that we're talking about here, the notebook one, obviously for the central dashboard's a bit different, but notebook one, most users of Kubeflow who are using notebooks are customizing that image in some way, or even making their own one. So, and I'm not sure we can even assume very much that there are people who are deriving directly from our one.
yeah, I mean, we use the standard one. We've made some, but not a lot.
But yeah, images are a problem. I agree. We need to address this. Security stuff is lacking right now in a lot of places. So what have you, is there an issue that you can link here or that we can all ping application owners of so that we can ping the leads on? If not, maybe let's raise one in the community repo and then tag all of the leads and then they can prioritize it on their own systems, whatever they're using to prioritize.
Yeah, I mean, since the working groups are supposed to have their own CI/CD pipeline, that's my understanding anyway, they should be scanning their images.
Yeah, and that's another thing I guess will be helpful once the Amazon-based CI/CD stuff has come in, where we can add that as a final step for any images that are being tagged in those.
Right.
I imagine, right? Is there anyone from Amazon here that can clarify that? Yao?
This is Yao from AWS. Yeah, I think after our CI/CD finished and we are delivered to community and make sure most of the working groups that has already adopted our optional test infra can use our delivered test infra. Everything will be open sourced and managed by community.
Okay, so what we're saying is that, do you think it would be something that you would add to that infrastructure or something that working groups would, sorry, when I say that something, I mean image scanning, would be something that you would use something that Amazon provides, or whether users of the testing infrastructure should implement their own independent ways of scanning, like using the GitHub one or using other ones?
And so from my part, I prefer to develop a built-in scanning step in our predefined CI/CD pipeline, but the working group, they can choose their own way to like build images or push images. But we do provide that. Yeah.
Cool. So that's good. So so hopefully once we can get further adoption, Jeff, that will be an issue which will be resolved.
Another point here is, Jeff, can you create an corresponding issue in the Kubeflow testing, and we can follow up on that issue and keep track there. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Perfect. And then maybe you should. I don't know if that one requires everyone to be tagged, but maybe tag the leads. I think it's still an important one to highlight to people.
Okay.
If they're not in the call, so just like tag every lead in a big CC, not a CC, but like an at thing.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, we've kind of run out of time. If anyone needs to raise anything urgently, please do it now. Anyone got anything? If not, here's to a better 2021. And good night or good morning.
All right. Have a good one.
See you guys.